KIZZA Besigye. Dr. KIZZA Besigye has been opposing the NRM government for now more than 20 years. And now he's coming up with another idea to start new protest over the response on COVID-19. Dr. KIZZA Besigye, we shall be talking to him on these matters, including the lack of unity in the opposition that we should have seen so that they can take on the juggernaut of the NRM. Retired Colonel Dr. KIZZA Besigye, thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to speak to you once again here in your beautiful office. You are on the spot. Good evening, sir.
A very good evening, Patrick. You are always most welcome, and believe you've had a good day. There is a lot of activity going on across the country as people prepare for the Christmas weekend, and so I hope that all is well with you. And those who are having trouble, I just got news of a very dear friend and relative in Rukunjiri who passed away last night, and condolences to the family and to all those who are in similar challenges.
Condolences to the bereaved in Rukunjiri. Dr. Besigye, you have been quoted by some media organizations that you are arranging to start another wave of protest against the government's response on COVID-19. It's more than 2 years of the epidemic, of the pandemic, and now you want protests. Why now, and what is it that has really triggered off this?
Well, Patrick, I wouldn't put what we are doing simply to a response to the COVID pandemic. It is a crisis that we have endeavored to unpack for all who care to listen to understand the crisis in our country. A very deep and ever-intensifying crisis that I am sure you experience living in Uganda and that most Ugandans experience. Now, this crisis has for sure been accelerated by the COVID pandemic and how it was responded to in our country. But it must be understood that this is a crisis that has been, building for quite a long time. And as I have said, we even at the onset of our platform, the People's Front for Transition, we produced a publication about the national crisis in Uganda.
But if you pause there, when you talk about responding to COVID-19, this country, when it comes to responding to medical emergencies, whether it is Marburg or Ebola or anything else, we almost have the golden standard of how things are done. Countries have been coming to learn from Uganda. Our response is the envy of the world.
Well, for those who simply don't live here, they may consider what you are saying as something
but
serious.
There are numbers to show, Dr. Besigye. There are numbers to show.
Yes.
Even if you look in the region, God forbid, the people who have died and those who have fallen sick, our numbers are not comparable, for example, to Kenya or Tanzania.
You see, Patrick, the response to COVID, if you want to understand it, to know its scale and its progression, you must do testing. Now, are you therefore telling me that our testing is better than Kenya's? Rwanda, which is, I think, the leading country within the East African region in testing for COVID tests per numbers of the population, Rwanda has tested 4 times more than Uganda has tested. So if it has numbers that are recognized, that they have found to be positive, that are more than Uganda, it's not because Uganda has less, it's simply because we have not looked. That is all.
Yeah, but if
Uganda is among the least countries
But at the end of the day, Dr. Besigye, you want people alive. You want to manage the disease. You don't want to have many people dead. In the United States, which has everything, almost 1 million people have died. So you need is to make sure people are alive.
No,
people are treated when they are sick.
First of all,
and people are following the SOPs.
So first of all, as I told you, what we are talking about is not just because of the COVID pandemic. If you want us to discuss the COVID pandemic, you need a show on the COVID pandemic. And I will,
Dr. Besigye, I think it's one of the elements you are picking to describe the crisis we are in.
It's actually not, but simply to put it to rest, since you've raised it, I have told you that to understand anything about what is going on in COVID in the country, you have to do testing. And I am telling you as a fact that Uganda is one of the least testing countries in the world. This is not questionable. Even those that the numbers you hear being posted, so many tests, most of those are testing people at the borders, people who are transiting, coming from Sudan, coming from Tanzania, coming from Kenya. Those are the numbers. But within the communities, there is no testing. Secondly, COVID got here in March of 2020. By August, according to the Ministry of Health, Ugandan Ministry of Health, I hope you follow this information, and of course World Health Organization, we already had reached stage 4 in terms of transmission. From stage 1 to the last stage, which is wide-scale community transmission. That's the worst that any country can have. We reached the last stage of transmission within 6 months. So if that is your gold standard, as I heard you trying to repeat some words of this country, unfortunately, is run by conmen. From the first person on top to the least, and now they start believing even their own lies.
Look,
they start believing their lies.
Do you have respect for your colleagues in your profession? Because if you go to the Entebbe, Uganda Virus Research Institute, that institute is revered for what it does. Mm-hmm. We are told genome sequencing is not something that is easily done. They can do it. They can tell us what variants we have. And you know it. Unless you have no respect for your colleagues in the medical profession.
See, I have respect for my colleagues,
yes,
certainly.
And I'm quoting
Uganda Virus Research Institute, which is of course maintained by foreigners, not by your government, which has been built and maintained by foreigners, is only the one laboratory for 45 million. When we talk about genome sequencing, it should be done in all kinds of places.
I hear this information from your own colleagues, whom, by the way,
you see, I have told you that unfortunately, if there are colleagues who are in the government, I have just told you that this is a government of conmen. And those who want to thrive amongst the conmen must speak their language. Otherwise, they are sacked. So even in the professionals, we have con people. There is absolutely no doubt. Who just talk because they want to have food on their table. But the facts speak for themselves. And I have presented no, don't run away. I've presented the facts to you. And your gold standard, you have not disputed them. So I would like Ugandans to at least put to rest that whole nonsense of Uganda is a shining example of the response to COVID. It is not. I told you right at the onset of COVID that you cannot manage a pandemic without a plan of how you intend to respond to the various elements of the pandemic. And I'm sure you have seen evidence. And part of what we are responding to, the crisis that I'm talking about, is a crisis arising out of the absence of any coherent plan that is followed in the managing of the pandemic. That is why our children are still at home longest than children of any other country on earth, having been home for 2 years. You remember they were sent back to school only to be recalled after a week. That is your planning of how to manage a pandemic.
Isn't it okay to err on the side of caution?
The managers of the...
Isn't it okay to err on the side of caution, really?
Of
rather than endangering the lives of Ugandan children?
Of course it is.
You want
but when erring is your plan, when everything you do is an error,
but how,
then clearly you have no business managing public affairs.
If humanity is facing an existential threat, an enemy that is invisible and you do not know how it's going to manifest, is it wrong for the leader of the country to say, let's be cautious? At least we err on the side of caution to save lives.
You see, the pandemic is not something you speculate about. It is driven by science. It is driven by facts. And Uganda does not have unique parameters it uses which are separate from all the countries that took their children back to school. How can Uganda have different ways of analyzing from all the African countries, from all the countries of the world? It's not so. In fact, I would like to assert that what they have done is criminal. In fact, it's evil and should be condemned in the strongest terms possible, because it has destroyed a whole generation, not even just one generation. We are going to reel in this mess that they have created for generations. And that includes generations of your own children. So this is not a matter that we should, just talk about casually as if we are scoring political points. This is not about political points. This is about survival of the country.
But in the second wave, people really died. People really fell sick. In the event that you have no medicine and you have no vaccine, what could a country have done to protect her children?
Well, as I said, really, if we want to talk about COVID, we can have a whole show, and I will tell you.
I just want to move on to another, because...
No, but since you have said what could they have done to save lives, everybody knows that there was a hell lot that could have been done to save lives. Even the most basic, to provide information. I'm sure you know that most people up to now actually do not know the full information that is available everywhere on COVID. Secondly, to prepare, because the second wave you are talking about,
what do you want them to know that they don't know?
The second wave you are talking about.
What do you want the people of Uganda to know now that you think they don't know about COVID? And maybe it is just an exclusion of you in the medical profession and those who are a bit knowledgeable.
No. You see, if you want to give public information, you craft it, you design mechanisms through which that information will reach the public. I talked about this at the beginning of the pandemic. You could have even sent film vans across the country to deliver this information in a manner that everybody in their own language and in their own means can understand what is going on about the pandemic and how they need to stop it, including measures that would then assist them to do so. Like we have been saying, one of the measures of stopping it is washing. But how do people who cannot access water wash their hands all the time? These are simple measures that government could have put in place.
Dr. Besigye, there's no Ugandan who cannot access water because water is life. Actually, water is everywhere.
Yes, but if you are saying wash many times with soap.
So you think there are people waking up with no water at all and they stay with
Of course,
no water?
I'm sure you know that.
How do they even survive?
Because they have to buy water in jerrycans to use in the home sparingly. So we indeed advocated that water, especially from national water, should be free, open taps for the period of the pandemic. That soap, you should remove tax to make sure that soap is accessible, or even distribute to poor, homes.
With all respect, you have to be realistic, because you cannot say let there be water.
But when people
somewhere.
When people were dying of COVID in the hospitals, I'm sure you know that one of the killers was the absence of oxygen. 1 year after the pandemic had begun, trillions of shillings had been spent up to now, which have never been accounted for. So these are some of the areas that now have been building the crisis we are talking about.
Okay.
We should have had a plan. Among the plans of managing COVID, we should have had a plan of how to quickly step up the healthcare capacity, recruitment of doctors, of nurses, of technicians, of what, to scale it up quickly. Pay the healthcare workers so that they are able to work longer. Provide protection equipment so that they don't die. We have lost so many, and that's why partly why the healthcare workers are on strike, because they have no conditions in which they can deliver service. They themselves are not facilitated. They have nowhere to sleep. They don't have food. They don't have transport. They don't have this and that. And that is 2 years into the pandemic. You have the whole healthcare system paralyzed by strikes. So you think that that is the gold standard of how to manage a pandemic, I believe.
Well, if you talk about the healthcare system, well, yourself, you're a medical doctor, you know it better. And the issue in the healthcare system have not even come in the days of the pandemic, have been there before. And I'm sure this government will struggle with them, and perhaps any other government. But we want to move on now deeper into the crisis that you see and the crisis that you want to respond to this country. Because some people will say, look, we are buoyant.
Yes, this crisis, as we described it some months ago, can be summarized as a crisis of failure to thrive. FTT. Failure to thrive. Simply, the greatest majority of Ugandans can't cope. And we have broken this down as to people to understand this crisis. But for the current situation that we are talking about, that must be resolved immediately, we talk about the healthcare situation, because one of the biggest drivers of poverty, of suffering in the whole country, is the absence of healthcare and the cost to every Ugandan of maintaining their health when they become sick. This is a huge, huge crisis for our people. In fact, even when you hear me announce so and so has died, and I'm sending condolences, most of the people that are dying should not be dying at all. They are dying simply because of the absence of care. And, this has gone, as I have been saying, to the extent that now the whole healthcare service, the system, is really paralyzed. And that's why, if interns, the people who are doing their specialization, who manage hospitals, the ones they call senior health officers, if they go on strike even for one day, that means huge losses in terms of the health provision of the country. Now, they have been striking, and it has been, unfortunately, again, largely by misrepresentation within the media, that the main concern of healthcare workers is their pay. That is important, of course, because people who are motivated, who are healthy themselves, can provide service. But it is far more than that that they are complaining about. Healthcare workers are actually traumatized. Some become sick because of being in situations where they see suffering patients, that they know what is going on with them, that they have the capacity to help, but have nothing to use to help them.
Hold on to your point, retired Colonel Dr. KIZZA Besigye. We're going to take a break, and on the spot, we'll be right there. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Amara. My guest tonight is retired Colonel Dr. KIZZA Besigye, who is now trying to respond to the crisis that he sees in our country. Dr. KIZZA Besigye, you know, I've had an opportunity to follow you for the last maybe 19 years. And I've seen in most cases you talk about something big is happening. There's a crisis, there's gonna be a tsunami. You know, it's doom and gloom, but we move on, we soldier on. I mean, people watching and listening to you now will be saying, there he goes again.
Well, I believe that if what I'm talking about does not exist, is just the figment of my imagination, then it should cause nobody any sleepless night. It shouldn't even attract you to come and talk to me about it, because I'm sure there are many madmen in town who say all kinds of things that you are not looking for.
But Dr. Besigye, you're not a mad person.
Yes.
You're a leader and nobody is looking at you from that angle.
Yes.
I'm only trying to tap into what you have said before. Right?
Yes.
The crisis that seems to be like in a teacup, and somebody thinks it is a whole tsunami.
You see, a crisis
which never happens, luckily.
A crisis.
But you've been preaching this kind of language for a long time.
A crisis builds. And, you know, Ugandans should be extremely worried about slow death that has been going on. In fact, there has been a slow death of almost anything. It's calibrated. And it's just like, you know, a rat blows wind on your foot as it eats your feet at night. Those who have lived in houses infested with rats would know what I'm talking about. That's exactly what has been happening.
It's softening the bite.
So, for example, I've told you about the healthcare crisis. The healthcare crisis has been building. It's now such an enormous crisis that you cannot solve it by tinkering at the edges. That's why, even when they said they have released the money for health, for interns and other people to go back to hospital, then the laboratory technicians came with their own demands. The nurses are raging, you know, and it will be this one, it will be the paramedics, it will be, the crisis is so huge because we did not attend to it. And why didn't we attend to it? Because there were those voices, you know, no, they are telling lies, this is not so bad, you know, we are actually doing very well, you know, because this regime, what it uses to soothe people as it creates the decay in our system is misinformation. And that's why they invest, in fact, heavily. Rather than invest in people, they invest in deceiving them.
You know, Uganda, Uganda has been ranked the happiest country in East Africa, according to the World Happiness Report 2021, released by the UN Sustainable Development Solution Network. It is legit that in East Africa, this country and the people of this nation are the happiest.
So the medical people are happy?
Well,
no.
Aggregation of
you see, I told you that what the conmen who manage these countries invest in is lying.
I've just pulled a data, some statistics that.
Whose statistics?
Well, I'll read it for you. I can read it for you again because it's.
Whose?
Let me read it for you again.
And with $500,000, who will not put out any statistic for these crooks?
So why should we think that what Dr. Besigye says?
So no,
according to the World Happiness Report 2021, released by the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. I want to believe people who are doing this are professionals in the area. I'm inclined to believe them more than you because that's their job to do.
You see, you don't have to believe anybody. We live here in Uganda. Are the rates of suicide increasing or decreasing?
Try out Japan, sir.
Yes.
It would be the number 3 economy in the world. The rate of suicide is even much higher.
So what does that does that speak for happiness in the country, according to you? If we have said that health care system, and I have told you the situation in which it is, because every person to be happy must be healthy. Do you know, and you can check your statistics, that 1 out of every 3 children is stunted in this country? Your children, 1 out of every 3 is stunted for life. Do you know that?
So
is that a measure? Is that a measure?
Dr. Besigye, for a country that has the biggest percentage of East Africa's arable land here, for a country that has water with fertile soils and everything in our favor, if the parents of Uganda do not produce food for their children, should that really be a big blame to the government?
No, but
God has given everything.
Even before we talk,
everything is in our favor.
Even before we talk about whom to blame, does it sound to you like a crisis? If it is like that, because that is where we have to start. I'm telling you, there is a crisis. We can talk about what brought the crisis. The first thing to recognize is that there is a crisis, and yes, public management is critical for dealing with lives and how they improve in a country. Let me tell you that the British colonialists, whom we fought very hard to send away, had a system to ensure that every home has food reserve. These crooks who are running our country now, saying they liberated Uganda, liberated what? Do we have any food reserve at any level, whether at the home or at the country?
But you also know that those days, people in Rwakabengo or even in the village where I come from, Ongezi, had to go to dig by force. Is that what we should do?
What I'm saying is that government intervention can deal with issues of hunger or issues of people having food. Policy of government is critical. People's livelihoods are impacted by what kind of policies that are and investment that is made. So you find that, for example, environmental degradation, it's not something that every home is going to manage. It's a public policy. And if you don't manage the environment, then there is soil erosion.
I want to agree there's environmental degradation. I want to agree there is, because I see it, the forest cover is depleted in Uganda. But I also want to know from you, what can be the alternative for energy, for cooking, for Ugandans? Because the most important issue that is causing forest cover depletion is because we are cutting the trees so that we can eat and survive. What can be the alternative that is affordable and manageable in Uganda?
Oh, there is a lot.
Because I can imagine you're going to have dinner prepared using charcoal.
Yes, there is a lot that we can do to definitely overnight even.
I want you to tell Ugandans watching right now, those who are going to have dinner, maybe those who are going to have breakfast tomorrow, what can be the alternative for them to get off charcoal? Because 99% of Ugandans are going to have dinner tonight. Probably that dinner will be cooked either using charcoal or firewood. What is Dr. Besigye's alternative?
You see, this is what I was telling you that we are.
What is the alternative?
This is why I said that we are in danger. Because what makes a country move is knowledge.
I agree.
What creates products that provide solutions is innovation from people who have knowledge. If you have destroyed the process of building knowledge in a country, as we have, and this is why I said that keeping children away from schools for 2 years is the biggest crime possibly that any regime can do on its people, because that is what deprives people of knowledge. So if we had been building knowledge all this time, building capacity, there is absolutely no reason living on the equator that we cannot use solar energy developed by ourselves to provide energy for our people. There is absolutely nothing that stops that. You will never exhaust the amount of free energy that is generated by the sun. We have immeasurable amount of river energy that can be harnessed, and harnessed cheaply. Bujagari Dam, which was built with $1 billion plus, could have built 4 Bujagari dams. We could have been generating 4 times the amount of power we are generating from Bujagari, because the government stole the money. That's why we have one miserable Bujagari that does not even function to capacity. Everybody could be using cheap hydro power because it's available.
But the best you think in those villages in Aduku, in Chawente, in Mwenge, people can be using, hydroelectric power in their small little huts to cook food?
Of course, absolutely.
That's what should be happening.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they shouldn't be living. They wouldn't even be. They wouldn't even be living. You see, your mind is completely trapped.
No, because
you are looking at them living in huts where they are providing the electricity.
Because I know even the elite. I wish you could see in your kitchen. You could be using charcoal.
That's what I'm saying.
How do you even think about it? It's more.
I think you are the very typical elite that shows the crisis in which
elite where you are. It has to be incremental, step by step, and they can see steps being taken.
Anybody who wants to know the crisis our country has should listen to this man. Because, you see, Patrick,
I know you have a dream, but
God endowed this country beyond measure. You yourself, you said, there are fertile soils all over. There is water everywhere. You are wondering why people should not have food.
Yes, because it's easy.
But at the same time, you think.
It will germinate.
At the same time, you think that our people should still be living in those tiny huts where electricity can't get.
They deserve better, I know.
And
I'm
better.
Looking at if the Ugandan elite, even those with electricity cannot cook with it, then we know that for every Ugandan to use electricity to cook, it's going to take some time. It's not something you can just wish.
And the better is possible. So Patrick, that's why when we talk about this crisis, that crisis of people who live amongst plenty, but live in humiliation, that contradiction is the crisis. The cause of that crisis, the main cause of that crisis, is because those people who are humiliated in spite of the riches that are around them have no say. That is where the problem starts. It's not that they don't even know how they can make things better. They could, but they have no say. They cannot influence the policies that will improve them. Why? Because they live under fear of those with guns who rule over them, steal their wealth with impunity. That is what I've told you. You know, the money that went to Bujagari Dam, you were asking about energy, over $1 billion to construct a miserable dam of 250 megawatts capacity that should have lit, you know, the whole country. So, what we all know who stole this money, but what can you do? The money we are talking about of COVID, we know where that money went. A lot of it to State House for no accountability. Those poor people have no say.
But why do you say
the doctors who have no pay.
We have just,
it's not because there is no money to pay them.
this year, we came out from a general election. And I think those who had a say showed it. Here where we are in Uganda, people said no. People in Busoga said no. They voted against the NRM government. They protected their vote. And the results are here to everybody saw them. In other parts of the world, including where I come and where I come from, people voted for the status quo.
So Patrick,
Why
the voting,
why is it? Because
the vote,
having a say,
the voting pattern,
having the voting power and your vote to be respected can show you that people have a say.
Yes.
And I'm giving you an example of Buganda and Busoga, that Ugandans have a say. When they assert themselves, they can be heard with a lot of clarity and nobody can tamper with them because we have an example to show.
So Patrick, the voting pattern in 2021 was exactly the same. I mean, according to the results that were announced, was exactly the same as in 1980. In 1980, the opposition, which was then DP, was given the win entirely of Buganda and Busoga. In fact, here it hasn't gone as much in Busoga as it was in.
That
Is that the case or it's not?
It's an abuse to National Unity Platform to say they were given. They won, sometimes with blood.
So
This win was legitimate.
So if it was the DP win was also legitimate in 1980. So why did Museveni go to the bush? But the one who is causing trouble now, why did he go to the bush?
How can you even ask that? Yet you are his lieutenant.
Yes, because I know the answer myself.
You sustain him in the bush.
I know the answer.
I'm not going to answer that question because you know better.
No,
you are the cabal of the 1980s.
You see, you have to answer because you are the, as I said,
but you are
the crisis we want to solve.
You are part of that cabal. You should not ask me the question because you followed the man into the bush. In fact, you actually swore to follow him even up the gates of Kayaba. So you went with him.
So Patrick, since independence, no leader has entered State House because people's voices have lifted that person to the office. No leader. Mr. Museveni did not get to State House because people had lifted him through their voices. He was a candidate in 1980. I was his supporter. He didn't even recover his deposit. You know, he got insignificant number of votes.
But still you followed. Anyway.
No, don't run away. So no leader has ever become a leader because of people's voices. No leader has ever left leadership because of people's voices. Every leader has had to be bombed out. Every leader has had to bomb themselves into office. That is why I say people have no voice. Because if you have never brought anybody into office, you have never taken anybody from office, why would those in office do your will? Why would they give you service? And indeed, you have heard Mr. Museveni himself, with his own lips and mouth, say that he is not a servant of anybody, that he is serving his children and his family and his ideas. And, you have seen him being dismissive, for him, he has earned everything he has. He doesn't care about anybody.
Quite frankly, most politicians are actually minding their own business. I think he was just being brutally honest. He's for himself, like many other politicians.
Fine. So that is why the crisis we are in is a problem. That's where it comes from. That's why our children don't have education, because he's indeed educating just his. That's why everybody's business has collapsed, and nobody is caring. People's livelihoods have been destroyed and nobody is bothered. That is what we must solve. That's why we have no health care in the whole country and nobody is bothered, and we must solve it ourselves, not the government. That's why local governments in this whole country are bankrupt, and therefore they cannot provide services even if they wanted to. They don't have any money.
For all these to be realized, Dr. Besigye, there should be a coherent message coming from all those forces of change, speaking together, pulling in the same direction, so that maybe you can build the numbers and we can have some civic competence among Ugandans that can cause the change you say we deserve. How come you seem to be in disarray?
You see, first of all, as I have explained many times, you will never have a convergence of minds amongst everybody. It will never happen. Even in a family, you cannot have everybody agree entirely on everything. So what is important is the population which is in this crisis. It's the population in the crisis. It's the population anxious to get out of the crisis. So they should listen to all the voices. Ultimately, the population will get out of the crisis by their own action, not by the action of the leaders you are talking about whose voices are incoherent. It is the population to be able to take coherent action and to overcome their adversity. And they normally do. The population is not blind, is not deaf, is not unreasonable. They normally will discern what is in their interest and they will galvanize around it and solve their problem. That is even how in the war we fought before we knew that we had chameleons. There were many fighting groups, but the population listened to which fighting group was articulating their interest and organizing effectively to deliver it. And they rallied around that, and that's how the war was won. So even now, that's why the call we make is not so much to other organizations, but to the population. To say, by the way, first of all, understand the crisis. This is the crisis. This is what needs to be done to get out of the crisis. You have to rally together to make sure that this is done. And we have also said that change is not likely to come because your voices have been heard. No. That's why we think elections will not cause the change that is absolutely urgent for the people. It won't, because nobody listens to them. Nobody cares about what they are saying. So it has to be their own action. And that's why we say this is now, it has come, this crisis has been building, like you have been saying. You know, it has been building. And the population has also tried. It's not that they have not tried. They have been fighting. They have not been seated, the population. Even when elections come, they come and fight, but thinking that maybe in the election they can go through. And sometimes, indeed, the confusing messages that we give. So the population is, because it's the population in desperation, really. They are capable of acting. And this is why we are helping to crystallize the matters, to say, by the way, now we should all prepare to act together. Okay. Because doctors have been going on strike alone. Then the other day, the other ones. Now teachers are going to go on strike. Then it will be this. We are saying that won't solve the problem. What will solve the problem? If these interventions, which are critical, are not undertaken by the end of first week of January, which is not far, we should all prepare ourselves to take action to regain control over the country, so that our voices can be heard for the first time since independence, that our voices can be the commanding authority in the country. And that will be the ultimate solution for...
this sounds like a rallying call for chaos, right?
Well, you can call it chaos. Of course, it can be characterized in whatever way. It's a rallying call for change that empowers people.
Okay, hold on. Your point, retired Colonel Dr. KIZZA Besigye. He's saying that Ugandans are capable of acting, but what action will they take? We'll be right back. Welcome back. On the spot, my name is Patrick Amara. My guest tonight is retired Colonel Dr. KIZZA Besigye, who's calling on Ugandans to take action to change the situation, which he says we are facing a serious crisis. Dr. Besigye, sometimes you need leaders also to inspire Ugandans, and leaders in a different political divide, for example, the opposition. Do you think they will be able to follow this so that they can inspire Ugandans? Take the message. Be able to analyze the situation like you are. When they analyze it and accept it, you know what? Now we need to change and walk like you want to walk.
Yes, you know, like I have said many times before, experience teaches us, you know. In 2001, 2006, I did not know that if we mobilize enough, that we would still not be declared winners. I did not know the dysfunctionality of courts. And I went to court twice. Don't forget. I went to court twice to challenge the outcome of elections. I participated in the elections and gained knowledge about what goes on. And that's why after 2011 elections, you know, I said, no, based on what we have seen, we have to change course. Because, you know, if, like they say, If I slap you once, it could be an accident. If I slap you twice, maybe it's a coincidence. But if I slap you 3 times, then surely there must be something now seriously wrong, and you can no longer take it lightly. So after the 2 times, when we reached the 3rd time, we always hold reviews to review what happened in the elections. So on the 3rd review, we said, no. This now clearly points at the need for a different approach. And
but that didn't stop you, because you're talking about 2011, to offer your candidature again 4 years later.
Yes, you see, but with what message? Because if you listened to, it's not just a candidature. If you listened to what I was saying in 2016, I was telling people I have not come to ask you for votes, because I had come to the conclusion indeed that they did not have any votes. So I came and told them, by the way, I have not come to ask you for votes. You don't have any votes. You have no voice. You have no say. I have come so that we work together a way that can cause us to regain our voice. Organize yourselves into groups of 10. Let's build a network all over the country, which we were calling Power 10. And let's use this network of organized citizens to resist the repressive force that is keeping us without voice, and to regain our voice.
Clearly, they didn't listen.
No, they did.
You are disregarding them.
They did. You see, Patrick, struggles don't last a night. No, they don't. Even when they listen, it still takes time to organize, to develop their confidence, and we are not acting in isolation. Then, as that was going on, as we were organizing, indeed other people started saying, no, but the problem is not the elections. The problem is the candidate. Besigye seems to be working with Museveni secretly. So maybe the problem is not, we can still win the elections if we have a different candidate. And when I heard that voice, I said, okay, this should also be tested out. And I said, okay, I may be indeed the problem. Now that has helped, because now, even those who are saying elections may have now categorically said they entirely agree that elections in and of themselves will not solve this problem. So we all need to come together and discuss how to move. That is, struggles evolve, struggles develop. You just don't go because people have listened to you, the struggle is over. No. Some struggles have taken 50 years. The British ruled us for 70 years, not because we wanted to be under the British for 70 years. So until we all get our act together, and maybe we would have, if they were not, you've had me castigate our elites. You see, elites should ordinarily provide the informed guidance to the other members of the population, should be the inspiration, should inspire others, should guide them and lead to faster movement of society. We have unfortunately a disproportionately high percentage of elites here in Uganda who are, a huge part of the problem.
And why is that?
I believe it is it's a multi-factor source of a problem. I don't think there is one particular reason. Part of it is certainly the type of education that our elites have had, which is colonial education that was preparing them to serve the British, not preparing them to be masters. We have largely maintained that education. And that's one of the things that we must really resolve. In resolving the education crisis, we must resolve the education content. What type of education our children have? Is it education that makes them innovators, that makes them thinkers, that makes them producers of new products, of new ideas, of new methods? Or is it methods of just assisting thinkers, which the colonial education was? So whatever source.
KIZZA Besigye, you say Ugandans have been oppressed for so long. Ugandans are in a crisis. Ugandans are hurting. So what will it take for the Ugandans to get some kind of anger? Should I even call it holy anger? Is it going to be an epiphany of every Ugandan say, this is it, this is the time?
Yes, and you know, as I have said, for a number of times we've been near there. So three things we have pointed out which are critical. One is to have a critical mass of people who understand the crisis, who are determined to deal with it.
How do you get them?
Information. And part of the reason I indeed welcome your invitations to speak through your airwaves is so that more people can hear that. So people through, and that's why, of course, the regime also works over time to make sure that people don't get information. That's why they will not allow meetings. That's why they throw us off radio stations. That's why they will obstruct any attempt to communicate to the population directly.
Information to the people is one way, so that you can have
so that is
people who understand.
That is the most important, that you have informed people who are determined to change their course. Secondly, is that they have to be organized, because whether they are determined to have change, unless they can act together, speak together, it will not happen. And as I have said, not everybody, but a critical mass of them. So building organizational competencies and rallying points around the population, which is why I told you we are building those power tens, that in every area there are people who are connected to each other, who are all sharing information and ready to act together. That is the second step, which is what even now the People's Front for Transition seeks to do. So it seeks, first of all, to communicate that information, that we must work for a transition. When the NRM junta goes, as it will for sure, before we can have a new dispensation, we must pass through a transitory period in which we review what has happened, we heal the wounds that we have all as the communities got in all these years, that we establish a new agreement amongst ourselves, a new constitutional order which freely we have agreed to, that we build institutions arising out of that constitution, and that then we can have how to choose leaders and how to be led in a free and fair system, that we can have free and fair elections. For the very first time in the history of what we know as Uganda. So that transition we must procure. To procure it, we must overcome the military rule that is there in the country. And to overcome the military rule is what I have said. First of all, people know that this is very, very important. Two, that everybody who understands is willing to do something. Three, that they are organized. And once they are organized, then we can take action together. And if we are organized and take action, it won't even spend a week before you can have change in the country.
The people who want to dislodge from power are not going to stand by and watch and let it happen. You know they are going to stop you in your tracks. You remember in 2020, November 19th, what happened on the streets of Kampala?
Yes.
That still scared people to the bone marrow.
That is so. You see, Patrick, we are not pioneers. Every free part of the world, anywhere in the world where they call it people free and whose voices rule, where leaders are servants, anywhere in the world, they have gone through this struggle. So there is no, it's like the pains of a childbirth. A woman can never have a child without going through pain. There are no two ways about it. A country will never have freedom except going through that pain. The good thing is that once you go through it successfully and consolidate a democratic dispensation, it's extremely difficult to go back. So it's a process, a painful process that we have to go through.
Okay.
And you know, I am convinced that the various ingredients are there, and that the regime you talk about, which is determined not to see this happen, is itself in disarray. I can tell you that the soldiers, the greatest majority of soldiers, whom they are relying on to terrorize us so that this does not happen, themselves want change. Soldiers.
How have you concluded that?
Oh, you should have seen, even in this election, where soldiers vote, you'll find that, because I don't know what happened in 2021, but in 2016, wherever, and Mr. Museveni also lamented about it, the soldiers in Zambia, around the police there, we won massively. That's why even women were being chased out of the police stations and so on, saying these police stations are a problem. We won in 2016, even in SFC, in Entebbe. So there is...
We're going to take a break and be right back.
Yeah, so this force you are talking about, which won't let us get what people want, is not a strong force anymore. And that is thanks to the struggles the people have, gone through all these years. It's been you see, this struggle of the people, which does not use guns, is a guerrilla war. It's slow attrition. So we have been causing slow attrition on the regime. The soldiers themselves you see around, you know that, with the guns and so on, they want change even more than the ordinary people. And so if people become organized, what happens everywhere in the world is that soldiers join the people.
All right.
And that is about to be seen here in Uganda.
Okay, retired Uganda, Dr. KIZZA BESIGYE, I want to thank you so much on this 23rd day of December. Well, Ugandans are going to celebrate Christmas and of course enter 2022. What's going to be your message in very brief? I know what you've been saying is also the message, but if you can...
Yes, but Patrick, you see, the country, Uganda, is going through a period that is very similar to the period of the Roman Empire when Jesus was born in Bethlehem. That time, the Romans ruled over Jerusalem, and there was a lot of terror. people were all forced to support the Romans. The judges were behaving like the judges we see here. In fact, that's how Jesus was sentenced, even though he had not committed any crime. The religious leaders were corrupt also. That was part of Jesus, of the mission of Jesus, to fight against the corruption within the synagogues and the Jewish faith. So the times are reflective of what happened then. And the struggles, therefore, that the people of Uganda are going through should be inspired by the struggle of Jesus Christ, the mission of Jesus Christ, fighting for the poor, for the marginalized, for those who had no voice. And eventually, even though he was killed, today, Christianity is the biggest, Jesus Christ has the biggest number of followers in the world, standing now at 2.5 billion. Although, he was humiliated and killed on the cross. So Ugandans should be inspired to continue struggling for justice like Jesus' mission was. I wish you, all of you, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, in spite of the very tough challenges that we are going through. God bless you.
I want to thank you so much, retired Colonel Dr. KIZZA Besigye, is telling us that we are actually living in the biblical times of the Roman Empire, where the priests and the judges were corrupt. But we know Uganda is a country of had our tumultuous past. We are a very resilient country. We're a good country with good people. And I think if we can put our minds together and our energies together, we can always push in the right direction for the right way for Uganda. Merry Christmas, and we also wish you a prosperous 2022. Good night and God bless Uganda.